President Joe Biden on Tuesday praised Senator Bernie Sanders for having what he calls a significant influence on American politics and said he hopes his primary rival will play a role in his own campaign if he should be the Democratic nominee. Speaking on NBC's Today, Biden reiterated his commitment to picking a woman as his vice presidential running mate, but he said that he's spoken to Sanders recently and that he wants him to be a part of his presidential journey. Biden said, quote, "Bernie has an incredible following. He's maybe one of a half dozen people in American history who may not be the nominee, but has had an impact on American politics in a significant way."
Joe Biden wants Bernie Sanders to be part of his journey. In technical terms, in abusive relationships, this is called the after the beating makeup session. I know I slapped you. I know I slept with the maid. I know I hit you. I know you have a black eye. I'm sorry for that. I really am. It angers me. I'm trying to get control of that, but I'm sorry. Let's make up. Let's have sex now. Let's do something and show that, I'm a better man than what I seem to be when I slapped you in that way. Or vice versa. Maybe it's the guy that's getting slapped around by the woman. Who knows? There may be a fandom relationship that's gone bad. Whichever that is, this is the after makeup beating. I want Sanders to play a role in this process. My special journey. He's influenced American politics. He's done these great things. And I want him to do something in something for my campaign. Basically, what he wants Sanders to do for his campaign is pretty straightforward and pretty clear. He wants Sanders to go out and get all of those people to vote for him. Right here. If I am the nominee, I'm confident Bernie will push his supporters to support me, just as I am in the reverse. Former vice president told his donors late Thursday. He's poured his heart and soul into this. He's made some significant changes in American politics that have been positive. That's the talking point from here on out. Joe Biden is presumed to be the nominee. So at this point, he's looking for his vice presidential picks. And he is trying to be conciliatory towards Sanders because he needs that level of support. 15% of Bernie supporters have said they're going to go to Trump. I strongly suspect that number is going to be higher than what the polling is saying, but that's just my own guess. But whatever, 15%. Joe Biden is 24% enthusiasm. That number is so low. It's the lowest in the last 20 years. And typically when those numbers have been low, that has resulted in that person losing the race. You would need a massive amount of support in order to get Joe Biden over the finish line, especially in a secondary presidential year. When you take the projections out, even if Joe Biden is able to win the popular vote, you still have this issue of the Electoral College that, yes, Hillary Clinton lost. He has to make up those numbers. Now, it's very possible if Trump really screws up the coronavirus thing and people start blaming him for it, that it doesn't matter. Joe Biden could be drooling at the lips when they drag him shuffling, mumbling into the White House. But let's say, for example, Trump does a relatively good job. He does an about face, and the public doesn't blame him for it. Maybe he dances pretty well. Maybe during the debates he trashes Joe Biden so much that the public just overlooks the fact that Trump killed millions of people in the way that he responded to this. Who knows? I'm just making the basic point that Joe Biden, this is the makeup. That's what this is. You've had media, you've had politicians attack, revile everything that you believed in regards to policy. And by the way, everything that many of the people in the public thought the Democratic Party believed in. Meaning the stuff that Sanders was pushing for is what many people in the United States who didn't pay attention entirely to politics thought the Democratic Party was for. I thought the Democratic Party was for that stuff when I wasn't paying attention to politics. And it's like, yeah, Obama, those fucking Republicans. If it wasn't for the Republicans, I was there. Not there anymore. They attacked us relentlessly. In fact, not just attacked us. They couldn't lay a glove on Sanders. Look back, think back. Couldn't lay a glove on him. Everything they threw on him, it Teflon. Because Sanders is an ideological actor, and in being an ideological actor, he's authentic. So what do you hit a person who's authentic with, who owns their errors, who owns their fuck-ups, who own the things that he knows that other people are not necessarily going to agree with him with, but he owns it. And he makes his argument as to why he owns those things. That's difficult to hit. It's easier to hit somebody with hypocrisy. When Elizabeth Warren gets on stage and said Pete Buttigieg in his wine cave, and Pete Buttigieg says, what are you talking about? You were in that wine cave like last year. When did you start having an issue with this money thing? Because it's a clear hypocrisy. She doesn't necessarily believe it. She's taking a political position to get from point A to point B in order to stand beside Sanders and con lefties grifting money and votes. That was her point in taking that position. Pete Buttigieg can make that point clear because it was so hypocritical when she made her attack. You can't do that with Sanders. What they ended up with in unison was Sanders supporters are uniquely aggressive and effectively angry. And in effectively being angry, they're bros. So they're racist, sexist, they are not homophobic, but racist and sexist definitely, anti-woman. These were the attributes that were attributed to this particular group. Keep in mind, many of Sanders supporters, the majority of Sanders supporters, were multiracial, especially if you're talking about under, let's say, 34. When you get into the elderly group, yes, those break down heavily for Joe Biden. But I'm just making the very basic point. This is a class and age, or you can even say cultural, dichotomy between these two. With a group that wants things to change and another group that for the most part just wants things to go back to what they consider normal, missing the point that normal is entirely relative. You have no point to your world. None. No point to your society. There's no God, there's no king, there is no nothing that says it needs to be X or needs to be Y. And we, in an odd distribution, chooses to work, toil away, perpetually vulnerable, choosing candidates like Joe Biden that can't even give a coherent statement because they're so terrified of the boogeyman, Trump. Trump is already in office. You're absolutely terrified of somebody who's already in office. You have the opportunity to get something different. And instead, you've gotten so used. And I'm not blaming people because it's one of those things where it's implicitly learned just based on the way you propagate what's put up, what they're familiar with, what they know. And what they know is Al Gore, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, Barack Obama. And here's the catch. 3 of those lost. The only reason that Obama won is because he ran a campaign of hope and change. And if you think back to that, he was radical in that race that they said this radical can't win. He did win. The public was looking for something different. Democrats will vote for Sanders. Independents will vote for Sanders. The catch here is that the fact that Sanders gets Democrats and is able to pull this other contingent, that's a winning coalition in regards to winning the race. My concerns with Sanders I've aired those. This notion of inability to have a killer instinct, this inability to fight in a understanding that he's in a different game space where his ideology doesn't necessarily apply. Those are my arguments for Sanders, and I've made those arguments for the past year, if not longer. And ultimately, I would make the case that that's what done him in. Keep in mind, this is the after beating romance that's taking place now. But I just want you to remember what was taking place before. It wasn't just Sanders. They went after us. They attacked us as a way of getting to Sanders. My dad wasn't around much. And as he not being around much, in fact, wasn't around at all, they weren't separate. Every so often he'd come around and you wouldn't see him for months or years. But what he would do is he would take out stuff on me, meaning he wouldn't give my mom, let's say, cash, or he wouldn't necessarily help with when I was ill, give time over. That was something that could be done because he was pissed off at her. That's kind of what this is, right? Ultimately, they couldn't get at Sanders, so they attacked Sanders supporters as a way of attacking Sanders. Sanders supporters are uniquely angry. They're uniquely bad. They're attacking women. They're aggressive. They're bros. They're racist, etc., etc., etc. And that became the mantra from Elizabeth Warren, from all of these other people in the Democratic Party's race. Sanders is responsible for his angry, unruly, aggressive, attacking supporters that is attacking women based on what Warren is saying. They're attacking us directly. Put that in perspective. Like, think about what's taking place here. They're acting as if Sanders had some level of control over millions of people out there. And that if people who weren't backing Warren weren't uniquely onerous, or people who weren't backing Kamala Harris weren't uniquely onerous. It's nonsense. And yet, that was the attack piece. And Sanders, even to some degree, acquiesced to that, attacking his own supporters. It's the weakness that's the problem in this race. And I hope in an autopsy, lefties will realize that this level of weakness would never win.
Back getting into the presidential race.
Democrats like somebody new, and that is not going to be Bernie Sanders this time.
It's really hard to imagine who the Bernie Sanders voter is at this point.
Bernie Sanders, fall back. Please get away from us.
Senator, great to see you. Thank you for doing this.
He has a kind of gruff, curmudgeon-y side that is, of course, well known. He doesn't actually smile that much.
It's almost like Bernie can't tell the difference between kids and adults.
All right, I think you're dumb. I think you're dumb if you don't sit down and learn how to read and write. No, you were not born stupid. Come here. The only way I think you're dumb, I think when you think you're dumb, because you're not.
I think you're disheveled, you're unlikable, and you're pushy, and I don't think you should be leading anybody.
How old is too old?
I think the issue is, do you seem like you're in the contemporary world? He's a socialist from the 1950s yelling at people in the same screechy voice, without smiling, without any kind of personal connection. He looked like the angry man in the center of the stage saying, "Get off my lawn." And I don't think that's a good look for the Democratic Party.
I see him as sort of a not pro-woman candidate.
You may have heard the term Bernie bro.
The Bernie bro, right? Somebody who's a bit younger, whiter, I think, than the overall Democratic primary.
I'm with my magnificent vanilla brother named Bernie Sanders. That's Brother Bernie Sanders we're talking about. That's Brother Bernie Sanders we're talking about.
Socialism has been a manifest disaster.
Alec would still be here today
At what point, they even go as far as to say, Bernie Sanders makes my skin crawl. MSNBC, creatures of the Democratic Party, attacked Sanders and attacked his supporters months on end with one smear after the next, one attack after the next. They went so far as to say supporting Sanders is tantamount to being sexist because Elizabeth Warren is effectively the exact same person. They have the exact same policies and her policies are better. So if you're backing Sanders, it just shows that you are sexist. MSNBC, Democratic Party, propaganda piece. That's the shit that they were saying about Sanders and about us. Now, it's the makeup. I'm going to massage you. I'm going to touch you. I'm going to kiss you on your ear. I'm sorry for slapping the shit out of you. You make me angry sometimes. I just need you to calm down. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Long intro soapbox. Sorry about that. I slightly forgot. I was being bugged by my thoughts in the intro. But welcome to the Soapbox. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. You can always support PayPal Patron. It helps the show. This content is brought to you by you, and I thank you for doing so. I have to be honest. I have a simmering rage recently, especially for the last, I would say maybe month. And I can't necessarily place exactly where that is coming from. And I've tried to place it. I've tried to figure out like the root cause of that, and I can't necessarily get to the bottom of it. I think it has something to do with, the presidential primary. And I think what it boils down to is I feel like it wasn't a primary, or it was an unsatisfying primary, or the result is unsatisfying. It's a combination between the result being unsatisfying and my warrior went to a knife fight with a Bible. That's what it feels like. It's like, all right, my warrior, all right, yes, here's the guy. This is my guy. This is my guy. And their guy comes out with a knife. Their guy comes out with a knife. Their guy comes out with a knife. And my guy comes out and he has this Bible. And he says, I'm going to win this shit with my Bible. And we stood by and was like, all right, go for that. And when he was doing well, we thought, all right, maybe he knows some shit that we don't know. Like, because my thought was, and I kept saying this, the killer instinct thing is a fatal error. Go back and look at my videos. And I said the same thing about Jeremy Corbyn. It's not a match. It's like, I guess my point is this. I kept saying that not having the killer instinct thing is a problem. And it's a problem because you're in a contest where everybody is out to get you. You know that all the oligarchs, all of the media, I just showed the video, the media consistently out to get him, the newspapers out to get him, all of these organizations out to get him. But that's known, right? It's called establishment for a reason. It's an established order of things. If you're trying to change that established order of things, those established order of things don't just stand there and let you do it. They're reflexively, all the incentives in the world that allow that particular establishment to be what it is are going to push back on you trying to do so. It's a given. That's my point. The fact that it's difficult is not a reason to not do it. All of the pain and sorrow that you as an individual acknowledges compels you to do it. Difficulty. It's just baked into the cake. I don't have kidneys. My kidneys don't work. How do I supposed to pursue life in that case? Is it difficult? In some cases, yes. But is that enough to stop you from doing the things that you want to accomplish? No, it's not. You figure out how to get around it. You figure out how to get over it. You figure out how to mitigate it. There are times when you make exchanges of feeling shitty in order to get from point A to point B. But you do those things. You do them because you have something else that you want to accomplish that matters that much more. I'm making the point that if you're going to be in this particular contest, you would think that the individual will care so much, the sense of urgency, especially since the way he ran his campaign, that they would run the campaign in the same way. That's not what we got. And so it feels like an incomplete contest. It feels like my guy didn't necessarily do what was necessary or what was politically expected in order to win a contest, especially considering what he put on the table as his reasons for being. The existential crisis, the pain, the anguish, people losing their jobs, not having health care, people being persistently vulnerable, and what that does to the psyche of the individual to be persistently vulnerable. Gig workers who can't make ends meet. I'm talking about absolute, utter chaos, levels of inequality that is staggering, not to mention the degradation to the environment based on just capitalist greed. I agree with you on all those things. I agree with you that people being vulnerable is horrific from the standpoint of what it causes issues in the society itself, meaning societal ills. That societal ills, people shooting themselves, drug use, things where they are self-destructive behaviors, are not magic. It's not a given. Human being or human nature is water in a glass, meaning that this stuff is more so, this is how human nature behaves in a capitalistic system that provides this level of resources, that has this level of inequality, that this level of X and Y. That's not necessarily the behavior you would see in a society that was not organized in such a way, meaning the outcomes would be different. I agree with Sanders on pushing all that stuff. And if it burns you, then the sense of urgency should make everything else subordinate to getting those things accomplished. That's what I want. That's all I want. I don't necessarily think that's even obnoxious to ask for, especially when people are sending almost $250 million. That's what I assume. And maybe to some degree, that's the root of my rage. I grew up from maybe 13 on or 12 on playing tournament chess. In my head, you use every tool at your disposal to attack, undermine, subvert, take down your enemy. And yes, I know the political space is different, but the rule set of chess is fundamentally built into the universe. And it applies in the same way with politics. The catch here is politics adds a different dimension of emotionality to it, meaning your feelings as a candidate gets in the way of any kind of ideological motive at times. And in Sanders' case, his feelings for Joe Biden got in the way of him efficiently running a decent campaign. You don't believe me? Look at this. Right here, BuzzFeed. Meanwhile, a small group of senior aides have been pushing Sanders for months to go harder on Biden. The problem, Sanders actually liked Biden. Personally, they got along better than he ever did with Hillary Clinton, aides have said. The former vice president falls into an exclusive category for the Vermont senator, the people who were nice to Sanders before he mattered. As two aides put it recently, back in January, it was the candidate's decision to personally apologize to Biden after one of his surrogates, Zephyr Teachout, wrote an op-ed about Biden's corruption problem. Amazing. Utterly amazing. I'm sorry about your healthcare, dog. I was friends with him. Joe Biden has a healthcare plan that is going to leave hundreds of thousands of people to die because of the policies. It exclusively does so. Doesn't even try. It's a given at this point. But he's your buddy. That burns. It's like having sex and not finishing. That's what it's like in a kind of a base level way, where the other person gets off, male or woman, I don't care, it's interchangeable, and you're a bit annoyed by it, and you're massively unsatisfied by the entirety of the process, and even feels a little bit of anger, indistinct, because the other person has got his jollies off and has a bit of a glow about him. It's a certain envy. That's kind of what it's like. And I'm sorry if everybody can't necessarily relate to that because they haven't necessarily had that particular experience. But that's kind of what it is in a base level way. That's kind of how I feel about this primary. I was expecting an actual primary. When Hillary Clinton was running against Barack Obama did this. He literally, where is it? Right here. In real terms, Obama, shit, where did I put it? I'm sorry, I have a lot of windows open, and I thought, damn it. Well, let me just say it. Obama opened up an ad, a web page. Oh, right here. Obama opened a web page of Hillary Clinton attack ads. Now, he did this saying that Hillary Clinton was attacking his character. He's impugning my character. The mini site simply said, Hillary attacks. Catalogs negative newspaper articles, speeches, and press releases that the New York Senator's campaign has issued that Obama campaign says are personal attacks on Obama's character. Obama ran this attack ad on Hillary Clinton, just to show you what a primary looks like.
Wrong with politics today. Hillary Clinton will say anything to get elected. Now she's making false attacks on Barack Obama. The Washington Post says Clinton isn't telling the truth. She championed NAFTA, even though it has cost South Carolina thousands of jobs. And worst of all, it was Hillary Clinton who voted for George Bush's war in Iraq. Hillary Clinton, she'll say anything and change nothing.
Ouch! Ouch! That's an ad! That's an attack ad! Now, why do you run that ad? Does it make you feel squishy if you run that ad? It depends. If you don't like Hillary Clinton, you're like, ugh. If you do like Hillary Clinton, you're like, ugh. But the fact that that person said, ugh, is what you're looking for. This is blood sport. It's politics. This is not... People aren't there in Washington to give you anything. They have all the incentives in the world of cash that you don't see, you don't touch, you don't see those conversations in open back rooms. You have no tether to that. That's who they listen to. In your very specific case, the things that you want, you need some level of political leverage to get those things. And when you take your eye off the ball or hands off the wheel, they're going to go towards the incentives that give them cash. Obama running this attack ad is a brutal ad. But Obama, to some degree, has to run that ad. Why? At the time, he's an insurgent candidate, meaning the African American community wasn't on board for Obama, if you remember. They thought that Obama couldn't win. Keep in mind, the African American vote boils down to who keep the monsters at bay. The monsters are in the other party, so go with Clinton. When it became clear that he had a chance to win, the support shifted. The catch here is Obama wasn't still an insurgent candidate. He was the radical in this particular race. And you, as the radical, sometimes need to put a knife in the person, because making aspirational claims about what you're going to do does not always necessarily work to get you elected. Not to mention, just like in the Bernie Sanders camp, those aspirational claims, because the Democratic Party has been so feckless and worthless and useless in regards to policy, just outright unimaginative, that the public has no example in the recent memory of the big claims that you're talking about. So yes, the aspirational part has to be there because you do want to give people this particular vision. But you also at some point need to put a knife in your opponent in order to puncture any kind of image or any kind of notion that people had about this particular person, especially in the context of you and how you are going to be better than them. Aspirational politics in and of itself is nice, but it doesn't work. Running on a rainbow, believing, hopeful, naive, that that's going to get you to where you are is not the way you're necessarily going to win a political contest. The environment dictates the behavior, not the other way around. And in this particular contest, it was imperative that you put a knife in Joe Biden. This ad by Obama is absolutely and entirely fair game, and it would have been fair game to do something similar in this particular race. Sanders, however, because again, that's his buddy. That's his buddy. And, you know, part of me wonders how much we have to blame in this. We watched him do this. Put in perspective. Some of you may hate what I'm saying here. And some of you may say, oh, dude, you're not being fair to Sanders. But be honest and come at me on this. If I'm wrong, and if you think I'm wrong, make your say so. But where am I wrong? I am making the very basic point that if what you've done up to this point got you to where you are, and where you are is far behind in regards to delegates, far behind in regards to missing states, and losing this race, then certainly a certain degree of what could I have done differently comes to play. And the first thing on the list in regards to the autopsy has to be this notion of aspirational politics with this ideological bend towards that's all you want to run on. That's so aggravating and unsatisfying because it feels like you didn't run a race in a proper sense. You ran a race with an ideological bend that forbade you from going where you needed to go in order to have that actual real revolution. You could have organized Walmart workers, Target workers. You had tons of cash. And I understand Bloomberg being in the race siphoned money off in the sense. So fair enough, I get it. But the level of organization that could have taken place all around the world with the resources that you had at your disposal, that's one thing. But just in the pure political sense, taking everything else out, with the notion that momentum is garnered from state to state to state. Just one criticism. Killer instinct. The ability to do politics on multiple terrains. Yes, give your aspirational pitch. Create a Section 31 to do the things that you can't do. Recognizing that Superman always needs his Batman. Even Star Trek has Section 31. It's critical to the process. It's eating your peas. It's one of those things where, look, I know you necessarily don't like to go to the doctor, but you need to go to the doctor. I had a doctor tell me one time, well, look, Jamarl, you can even go to the hospital or you can go to the hospital. Those are your options. This is kind of what that is. It's part of the political process. It is not part of the political process where you can pretend that just doesn't exist. It does. You have a person who you need to get votes and support from. You're getting the Hispanic vote, the Asian vote, you're getting all of these other demographics, but you're not getting the black vote. And you're not getting the black vote because that black vote is tethered to Joe Biden. In part because of Obama, and in part because the public's perspective has been deadened to such a degree that Joe Biden just looks like the normal Democrat, and in context of him being the normal Democrat, looks most electable. What you as Sanders have to do to get that vote, when you are talking within your group, and you guys are having those arguments and trying to figure out what is the mechanism that connects the vote to Joe Biden, and how do we dismantle that particular mechanism, and can we dismantle that mechanism with just aspirational politics? That looks like that would have been the thinking in the room, and somebody should have said, no, you need to carve that vote from Joe Biden, and when he makes a mistake, you need to put a spigot in him and tap it. And if Sanders says, no, I don't want to do that, that person should have said, look, do you want to win this race or not? That's what they should have done. They should have been an asshole about it. Do you want to win this race or not? And if Sanders said, no, that person should have left, told the supporters, he doesn't want to win because he can't do what's necessary. He's too weak to do what's necessary in order to win this race. Now, that was never going to happen. But I'm just hoping that that was the conversation in the room. And it kills me to believe that Sanders, in having that conversation with somebody saying, do you want to win or not, walks away and saying, I don't want to play politics that way. This is what happened. Biden got nearly 2/3 of the black vote in South Carolina. 2/3 of the black vote in South Carolina. Joe Biden, how did he get that? How did he get that? He got it like this.
I got involved in the civil rights movement. We have the 8th largest black population in America. Most people don't know that. And I'd go to 8 o'clock Mass, then I'd go to Reverend Herring's church where we'd meet in order to organize and figure where we were going to go, whether we were going to desegregate the Rialto movie theater or what we were going to do. I got my education for real in the black church. And that's not hyperbole, it's a fact. But I got my education, Reverend Doc, in the black church. Not a joke. Because when we used to get organized on Sundays to go out and desegregate movie theaters and things like that, we do it through the black church. I was no big shakes, Reverend, in the civil rights movement. I was just a kid. I got involved in desegregated movie theaters and helping, you may remember Reverend Moyer in Delaware and Herman Holloway.
Joe Biden went from church to church to church, saying that he was part of the civil rights movement. As an African American, that burns me up. It's insulting on its face. He's tokenizing the civil rights movement in order for political leverage, or let's say political bona fides, that the public, given a false perception that he is somehow tethered to this particular movement, this sacred thing in the black community. The truth of the matter is this.
During the 60s, I was, in fact, very concerned about the civil rights movement. I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. I was involved in what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else. I was a suburbanite kid who got a dose of exposure to what was happening to black Americans when I'm in my own city.
Joe Biden went from church to church to church, lying through his teeth, lying about being part of the civil rights movement. If you're in the room with Sanders and you guys are having this conversation about how do we pry the black vote away from Joe Biden, Our aspirational talking is not doing it in South Carolina and some of these other states. How do we get it? How do we get it? And you find out that Joe Biden has been lying about being part of the civil rights movement. And I know the Sanders camp had access to this video because Sean King was posting this video out, and Sean King is a Sanders surrogate. And you guys need the black vote, and you don't run this video showing Joe Biden lying about the civil rights. Look, the catch is, it doesn't matter if Sanders gets the entirety of that vote that leaves Joe Biden. All that matters is that part of the vote leaves Joe Biden. If that vote gets ferreted out among the other people in the race, so what? It is better than all of that vote being in Joe Biden. Some of that vote, just in probability sense, will come to you. Even if the majority doesn't, you are so far ahead of anybody else in the race that it wouldn't matter. It would only, at that point, injure Joe Biden. That's the reason why you run this ad. That's the reason why you make this particular point. When he started lying about being locked up in South Africa for backing Mandela, and then Mandela turns around and says, hey, thank you, Joe Biden, for getting locked up for me. You should call that. It's vitally important. The demographic that you need, the demographic that is fucking you over, is the African-American demographic. That is your demographic. Which means that any and everything that you need to do needs to be tailored to that specific demographic, also the elderly demographic. But that's your attack point. Making arguments for youth vote doesn't matter because you already have the youth vote. This is the same rationale in the sense that Democrats can ignore African Americans because 90% of African Americans vote for Democrat. It's already a given. You need to get a very specific demographic. And the way you get that demographic is not aspirational politics. It is cutthroat politics, such as a video that I've shown you earlier, like this. You should have ran a video like this about Joe Biden's lying about the civil rights movement.
Poe says Clinton isn't telling the truth. She championed NAFTA, even though it has cost South Carolina thousands of jobs. And worst of all, it was Hillary Clinton who voted for George Bush's war in Iraq. Hillary Clinton, she'll say anything and change nothing.
Joe Biden has already said he's not going to change anything. Nothing will change under me. That's the ad. Obama ran that ad because Obama wanted to win, and everything else was subordinate to winning that race, including putting a knife, a fork, hitting Hillary Clinton with a stick, whatever he had to do. When he was on that debate stage, he was wagging his finger at her. Hillary Clinton, insurance companies will love Hillary Clinton. He had no issue doing that at all. Why? Because in his mind, he was going to be president. He had aspirational objectives going all the way back to when he was in college. I'm going to be fucking president. That's the ego and hubris. But in this particular case, he was bright, he was intelligent, and what did he do? He became president. But my point is, everything else, it didn't matter. He got rid of the white woman that he was talking to at the time, got himself Michelle. Everything else was subordinate to his objective. The fact that his objectives wasn't necessarily in the best interest of the American public didn't matter. Everything else, ruthless devotion to a cause. That's all I want. That's what I wanted in Sanders. I thought that all of the pain and anguish would be enough for that. And so it's unsatisfying. And yeah, it fills me with a certain degree of rage that this didn't conclude the way I want, missed opportunity in concluding the way that I want, continuing missed opportunity in leveraging what he has at his disposal to get more, and to the very least get concessions if you're not necessarily going to get the win, meaning not necessarily knuckling under and acquiescing. Whatever you believe your ethics are, Sanders, they don't matter. I'm sorry, in the grand scheme of things, they're not real. There are no absolutes in this case. Those are cultural things, ideological guardrails and lines that you accept. And in accepting those things, knuckling under and allowing something that's not real to adversely affect something that is. If hundreds of thousands of people are going to die under Joe Biden's healthcare plan, if you honestly believe that Medicare for all is the best system, allowing all of these people to become covered, not going bankrupt, not being vulnerable, not having barriers to getting health care and access to their drugs and all of these other things, if you honestly believe that, which I honestly, God knows, believe, there should be a sense of urgency about that. And your ethics and ideological guardrails need to be, to some degree, flexible in regards to trying to get those things accomplished. You've given your support over the Joe Biden, meaning they're going to give you nothing. That after the beating, touchdown, rub down, that's just an after beating, rub down. That's a tongue wag. That's them giving you verbal olive branch. But that olive branch comes with absolutely nothing. You've given over your support in the very beginning, meaning I don't have to give you anything. You've already given me everything. You're going to go out there and tell your supporters, back me. As his supporters, Sanders has already made the point that Joe Biden has no energy and enthusiasm and will have a difficult time losing. You should have made that point from the very beginning that Joe Biden, A, is not up for this, not up to snuff, doesn't have enthusiasm, won't be able to beat Trump, and is not the most electable. And you should have droned about that at every opportunity. Yes, some people might call it mean. It doesn't matter if it's mean. All that matters is if it's true and whether the audience approves. Joe Biden or Boris Johnson lost vote after vote after vote after vote in the prime minister, in the prime minister in parliament, but the public loved him for it because he was honestly pushing for a particular agenda that they agreed with, Brexit. I'm making the point that it doesn't matter. The media hates you. The Democratic Party hates you. They're always going to say bad things about you. That can't be your bellwether in regards to what you are doing. That's not real. What's real is what the public's perception to some degree of you that you could shape around you. And even that's to some degree, yes, that's the part that's real. That's the part that you will need to win. These other voices already hate you. Bake that into the cake. Deriding Joe Biden and his ability to get elected, making the point that Joe Biden is John Kerry, Al Gore, Hillary Clinton. Yes, some people might say it's mean. It is also politics, especially if you want to get elected and everything else is subordinate to that cause. You point to it here, meaning you fully understand what I am talking about.
Generational struggle. Depending on the state, we're winning people 50 years of age or younger, big time people 30 years of age and younger. I frankly have my doubts. Look, if I lose this thing, Joe wins. Joe, I will be there for you. But I have my doubts about how you win a general election against Trump, who will be a very, very tough opponent unless you have energy, excitement, the largest voter turnout in history. And
if you know that, then why did you run the race like this? Like, this is, fuck, man. I feel like I keep saying, my feelings towards Sanders are complicated. And right now, they're in the area of rage and pissed off and angry. It's like, it's a loss. But it's not a loss in the sense of getting beat. It's a loss in the sense of the guy just not willing to fight. I showed you the video of Joe Biden lying about the civil rights movement. Take a look at this. When Sanders was given the chance
excuse for black
to deal with this, asked directly on stage, where he had the opportunity to say, yes, Joe Biden has been lying about his record on civil rights. I walked with Martin Luther King. I was there. I was with King when we were doing those walkings. I was chained to a black woman. I was there, and I am indignant that Joe Biden will continue to make this claim. When Kamala Harris went after Joe Biden for being part of the busing thing, what happened? She popped up number 2 in the polls. Why? Because she was able to pull some level of support from Joe Biden on that particular issue. If Sanders, indignant, angry even, makes that very political point right here, what do you think the media would be afterwards? What do you think African Americans would say afterwards? How do you look at something as sacred as the civil rights movement and be okay with one of these candidates, these lying, hack candidates, saying whatever they need to say to get from point A to point B? Yes, he was with Obama, but goddamn it, he's lying about the civil rights movement. Some people would stay with him, but certainly there'd be a percentage that wouldn't. All you care about is a percentage that wouldn't. Instead, Sanders says this.
Senator Sanders, several weeks ago, Nina Turner, one of your national co-chairs, published an op-ed piece that said Vice President Biden has, quote, repeatedly betrayed black voters to side with Republican lawmakers.
Now,
and undermine our progress. Senator Sanders, do you agree with her? One of your most visible surrogates, that Vice President Biden has repeatedly betrayed black voters?
Well, I think what Senator Turner was talking about are some of the early actions of Vice President Biden. But no. Joe Biden is a friend of mine, and I'm not here to attack him.
You actually are. It's a contest. There can be only one. He demurred when given the opportunity to make the point that this man has been lying, running pillar to post lying about being part of the civil rights movement, whereas he was part of the civil rights movement. He wouldn't do it. He backs away from the point, effectively putting a knife in Nina Turner. You can make this point in several cases. The attacks on Social Security, the attacks on Medicare. Who do you think? What community do you think that's going to hit the most? Not having health care. Who do you think that's going to hurt the most? Joe Biden is still running around saying he's against Medicare for all. I've been looking at the carnage of the coronavirus. Look at this. The demographic that's voting for Joe Biden is getting hammered by the coronavirus. And Joe Biden is still saying, no, I don't want Medicare for all. The overwhelming majority of the population at this point agrees for Medicare for all. Up 9 points in agreement for Medicare for all. The overwhelming majority of Democrats is on board for Medicare for all. Now, Joe Biden says, I'm not for it. Now, if your name is Bernie Sanders, what should you do in this moment? Now, your ethics will probably tell you, well, I have to keep supporting Joe Biden. But you're also a politician. And those type of arguments have always a certain degree of flexibility in those arguments. It's politics, right? You could very well stay within your ethical boundaries. And in staying within your ethical boundaries, say the following. I said I will back Joe Biden. And I'm going to stand by that. I will continue to back Joe Biden. However, I do believe that my supporters will have a hard time backing Joe Biden. Back during the time in 2016 when I went from pillar to post backing Hillary Clinton, I tried my hardest. I went to states that Clinton didn't even go to, and she, or I, in making the pitch about her, got booed.
Right now, we have got to defeat Donald Trump. And we have got to elect Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine.
And as Sanders, I don't want to experience that again. We need to be honest. Joe Biden is not up to the task of running against Trump. And I, in all honesty, can't legitimately get my supporters on board to back Joe Biden. Yes, Joe Biden has my support. Yes, Joe Biden has my endorsements. Yes, I would stomp for him. But I got to say, the overwhelming majority of the country is looking for Medicare for all. Overwhelming majority of Democrats are looking for Medicare for all. My supporters are looking for Medicare for all. And they would probably not vote for Joe Biden if he didn't push authentically for Medicare for all. So yes, he has my support, but I would strongly suggest that my supporters need more. And if we honestly care about the number of people who are dying in the coronavirus, this number could get up to hundreds of thousands. Joe Biden's healthcare plan is allowing hundreds of thousands of people to die. Why is it okay for us to care about the coronavirus victims, but not necessarily the victims in Joe Biden's healthcare plan? I, as Sanders, can't stand by and allow that to take place without giving voice to it through my plan, and the plan that the American public at this point has agreed upon that they want the most, Medicare for all. If Joe Biden is not for it, I have to be honest, I have a hard time believing my supporters are going to be able to back him. Nevertheless, he still has my support. Now, in doing that, Sanders is saying two things. Yes, I as an individual will endorse Joe Biden. By the same token, he's also putting a standard, a line in the ground that his supporters recognize, and many of which will accrue around, where it is litmus tests. Sanders is not calling it a litmus test, but for all intents and purposes, he's saying a litmus test. And he's putting it in the context of his supporters. Now, the 15% of people who are going to vote for Donald Trump may increase on that litmus test because they're looking at it as, hey, Sanders is basically making the point that Medicare for all is a plan we should be pushing for and we should be organizing around, and that the Democratic Party needs to acquiesce to that. Now, whether the Democratic Party acquiesces to that or not, Sanders has just put a line in the sand that the Democratic Party has to give a yay or nay to. Saying nay to it, to some degree, gives privilege and allowance to those people who are accruing around it to not vote for that candidate. Biden loses. I don't give a shit if they blame me for this because I'm not a Democrat. And I would hope that those other people who organize around various principles and litmus test items saying, this is where I'm standing, I am not budging from this point, this is not a race to the bottom, that is the way you take political clout and political power. And Sanders starts that with that particular litmus test now. You don't have to take away your support from Joe Biden. What I'm asking you for is to put out a line in the sand, rhetorically, that gives your supporters permission to not vote for Joe Biden if the Democratic Party and Joe Biden doesn't acquiesce to Medicare for all. Now, if they don't acquiesce to Medicare for all, from my standpoint, it makes it that much more clear how much they're against not just you, but also American interests. We're in the middle of a pandemic. They stand for nothing. If you, as Bernie Sanders, can't necessarily harness the will of the public, change your campaign. Change your campaign. Stop what you are doing and change your campaign to something else to get some objective accomplished. If you don't want to pull back your support, at the very least, point it in a direction to try to get something accomplished, or at the very least create a line in the sand. Do something. That's all I'm asking. Yes, I know he's not going to do that. And yes, I know some people are like, dude, why are you hitting Sanders? But like I said, you would have to bear with me because there is a bit of rage in this process. Let's see. Why isn't this working? There we are. All right, let's see. I'm getting the feeling somebody's going to be coming at me. Brent McKinney, we need a supercomputer that can beat AlphaGo, top chess experts and neoliberals, Jamarl. Who you're telling, man? Who are you telling? But look, here's the catch. We had chances. Like, if this was a chess game and people were playing it, and it's complicated, right? And the person loses. And at the end of the game, they're looking over the game, because that's what you do when you're trying to get better. You're analyzing your games. And you point to the plot spaces where this was a bad move. I should have did this instead. This was a bad move. I should have did. It's chances. I had chances with an alternate version of what I did. That's all I'm saying about this race. Chances existed. Sanders just played this as if I don't like bishops, so I'm not going to move my bishops. And it's like, what? I would have never expected that. Part of me wonders how much of this is our fault. Like, we watched him do this. I was on my channel screaming like, Jesus Christ, dude, you gotta throw a punch. And yet, still backed him and still, gleefully kind of went with this notion that maybe he can win this way. I mean, he is doing well. He has taken the #1 spot. Maybe he can win this way. And then South Carolina. And the feeling changed almost overnight. Like the polling flipped. And you're like, whoa, what's going to happen? He goes into South Carolina and it crashes. And then it becomes almost the default position of the American media, and everything else just flips back in. Joe Biden is now viable. Sanders can't win the black vote. And it goes from state to state to state to state, getting crushed in the very area where Biden potentially would have been the weakest for lying about the civil rights movement. Joe Biden effectively sacked a piece, and Bernie Sanders wouldn't take it. And that was the specific piece that he needed to win that game. It's an alternate vision, yes. But it's an alternate vision if Bernie Sanders was running the race in the way that Obama ran the race. If Bernie Sanders ran the race, Obama ran the race, Bernie Sanders would be president right now. Not president right now, but you know what I mean. It's unsatisfying, and that unsatisfying quality burns. That's all. Maggie Smith. Patron show this week? Absolutely, Maggie. Oh, it was Sunday. We did one on Sunday, Maggie. It's there. It's there. The people united. Bernie loved to say that he never ran negative ads. His naivety must have driven advisors to drink. This is not local politics. I agree. You know, David Sirota was very angry at Sanders over this. They were talking about this in the background of the show, where David Sirota and some of the other people were hitting Sanders, saying, you got to hit him, you got to hit him, you got to go after him. And they just wouldn't do it, him and his wife. How would it help to make Biden supporters mad? Well, it's not making Biden supporters mad, Shruti. The issue is, look, Biden has 24% enthusiasm. Think of it this way. Your environment creates your behavior. And in many respects, your opponent sets the grounds in which you guys are going to engage. Because not everybody thinks the same. Think of it if you're playing chess. You have some people who play Ruy Lopez. You have other people who play the Pyrrhic. It just depends on the person. Depending on how they play, it's going to some degree determine how you play. You don't necessarily get agency of God in this process. You're always back and forth with somebody else. Politics, exact same way. If you're engaging Elizabeth Warren, it doesn't help to make her supporters angry because her supporters are bent on Warren in a female sense. They bound themselves to her in an identity sense. So any attack on Warren to some degree feels like an attack on them and their identity. It doesn't help to do that. From the standpoint of Biden, though, nobody loves Biden that way. Nobody is like, yes, Joe Biden is going to change the world. Fuck yeah. Nobody does that. And if there is one person that does that, fuck that guy. Joe Biden supporters are with him on this notion that he is more electable. That's not love, that's fear and cowardice. There's a difference in those things. If you make the argument that Joe Biden is lying about something, that doesn't blow back on them. You're not attacking them. You're pointing out that he lied. That's like saying Bernie Sanders running the ads on Social Security saying Joe Biden was lying about Social Security was going to hurt Sanders in some way. It's not. It's showing malfeasance. None of it is a lie. All of it is true. And if all of it is true, then those supporters are not necessarily going to be angry at you. A percentage is going to be angry at Biden. But say for the moment that a percentage does get angry at you, so what? Your issue is that you weren't going to get those voters anyway. You need to get those voters out of Joe Biden. That is the priority. That is the thing that needs to take place. The other thing is secondary. If you don't do that, you lose. This is kind of my point. You don't have a choice. The game space compels the action in and of itself. Sanders ideologically blocks himself from that action, disallowing him to attack Biden in the specific way that you need to attack Biden. I hope you understand what I mean, Trudy. It's not an issue of making his supporters angry. You're not getting those supporters right now anyway. It's a moot point. You need to carve those out of Biden, and this is the way to do it. With 24% support, those people aren't loving Joe Biden. Those people are just with Joe Biden because they think he can beat Trump. It doesn't hurt you going after him. It's not the same thing as going after Elizabeth Warren. It's more akin to going after Bloomberg. It doesn't hurt you. It's a political malpractice that he didn't do that, Trudy. So I'm just saying. Opening up the phone lines. Kitty Kills. Kitty Kills, the phone lines are open every day from 12 to 2. 12 to 2. 12 to 2. Dilly Y'all 357. Will we get to see your face on Political Misfits? We're still hunkered down. So right now, Bob and myself, Garland Nixon, Lee Stranahan, the entire crew is hunkered down in their houses. They've shut down the studio with the exception of the engineers. And so right now, Political Misfits, the only thing you can hear is this voice. I apologize. It's the best that we can do. I tried to actually get back into the studio, and my boss was like, yeah, fuck that, no. So this is where we are. We're hunkered down, trying to, do the space-saving thing. Let's see. Bernie's response in the last debate, I don't want to join you, Joe. Why don't you join me? Baba John 100. That was his response, but think about what I'm saying for the moment. And be honest. Be honest. What Sanders has done up to this point has been amazing. Honestly. No bullshit. Credit has to be given and credit is due. Sanders has been able to change the Overton window in regards to the way that we regard politics and the space to which we can have these debates. Meaning Medicare for all, expanding college, getting rid of student loan debt, getting rid of even medical debt. Going with this notion that government can be something fundamentally different. There is no point to government. You choose what you want your government to be and the priorities of that government. There is no right and wrong in that process. The problem is you're brought up from the time that you were born to the time that you hit your head in a capitalistic system, that intersection democratic system. And certain things have been driven in you that are giving you this perception of what right and wrong is. The catch here is that right and wrong doesn't exist in an absolute sense. And the perspective that you are given is to some degree conformed to be in the best interest of somebody who is not yourself. Your political space and all of these people who are screaming about capitalism and libertarianism and all this other stuff. The simple question is, what do you want your political system to be and what do you want the priorities of that system? And do you want that priorities to be organized around the 1% in profit where 95% of the income go to the top 1% and 3 or 4 people have as much wealth as half of the country? Why do you think that's fair? Is that what you want your system to be organized around? Or do you want your system to be organized around investing in human beings and human potential? It's choice. That's the issue. You have the resources to do any of that stuff. You can have abundance. Trump is out there right now trying to increase the price of oil. Why? Because the way your system is organized, that needs to take place. In order to make somebody else wealthy, you need scarcity. People to go without and prices to remain high. You have all the potential, all the technology, all the know-how in the world to create abundance. And all of the main things people need. This notion that you have people living off $10 a day is abysmal. Your world can be about so much more. Those people can be fed. You have the resources for that. You can build a society of sustainability. You can have an economy that's sustainable where you don't have this notion that everything has to be growth. And in the context of growth, they're only talking about the amount of money that they're bringing in, not necessarily how we as human beings prosper on this planet, trying to get rid of these social and societal ills. It's a fundamentally different conversation. But I'm making the basic point that not having a purpose, which is literally what this world, this game space is, at the very least from our corporeal perspective, and then to end up in a dystopian society where people work constantly giving the best hours and times of their life in order for oligarchs and the rich to make that much more profit while they remain perpetually vulnerable. And when you're in the middle of a pandemic, the thing that government does is to give a corporate bailout that every Democrat, or nearly every Democrat and Republican lined up to give. Fucking astonishing. That's all. I guess my point is I want to give Sanders credit for that. By the same token, with all of the potential, this lustful potential that was endowed in this race, and all of these lefties, millions of us that line up, throwing our support and our endorsement behind our champion, our warrior, the guy who's going to go into that knife fight and do what he had to do in order to come out and basically save millions. Either millions in a healthcare sense with the Medicare for all, either millions suffering under college debt, either millions in the sense of pulling back this kind of imperialistic military boot of the United States out of these countries, at the very least Syria and Yemen. One policy position after the next, even from the standpoint of the Green New Deal, where you're talking about having all of these people getting jobs where they have agency in areas and regions that they actually can care about, not just this kind of dumbed down positions. You're talking about a sea change in regards to how our society is structured. Yes, it was a lustful potential. And that potential was unfulfilled because of ideological issues with the candidate. It hurts. That's all. It just hurts. And I don't process hurt as hurt. I process hurt as anger. So this is where we are. And now they're saying Bernie voters are going to fall in line. And then you had this. You had this. Never forget this.
Number of issues, and we'll argue those disagreements out. Joe and I have strong disagreements on a number of issues, and we'll argue those disagreements out. But it is absolutely not my view that Joe is corrupt in any way.
Attacking a surrogate over something that was a light touch article. He could have made that argument that Joe Biden was corrupt, tied it to the Democratic Party and the shenanigans that take place where cash effectively pays for politicians. You're making the argument anyway, but you're not tethering and tying it to the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, arguing that these are two wings of the same bird. Do you want a political revolution or not? Do you honestly believe that you're going to have this kind of bloodless revolution where everybody's going to remain buddies and you're going to somehow take power from an established order that reviles and hates you and your supporters? What do you think this is? This is my ire. That's why I said my feelings for Sanders are complicated. It's this acknowledgement where I love the guy in the sense of what he's been able to accomplish and his ideological adherence of sorts. By the same token, it angers me greatly that his inability and unimagination, not to mention weakness in regards to trying to get what he wants accomplished in militant fashion. You should be militant considering what's at stake, right? The sense of urgency is built into your argument. And yet, that's not what we see in regards to action. It's aggravating to me. And to see that some members of his campaign is telling him to get out. It burns. It just burns. That's all. It just burns. Uh-oh. Trudy is about to go after... Uh-oh. What did you say, Trudy? Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Why not talk about how Bernie is being marginalized and ignored and cheated? It's not Bernie that is losing. It's the machine that is winning. So he is being marginalized. But think back to Elizabeth Warren. When we were making the argument, when Warren's people were saying, oh my God, Elizabeth Warren, they're trying to invisibilize Warren. They're making Warren invisible. And it's like, well, Warren is not being made invisible. She's just losing. Like when she dropped in the polls precipitously, nobody was talking about Warren because there was no need to talk about Warren. It was understood that she was a marginal figure. The catch is, they should have been talking about Warren to some degree. Because Warren, while marginal in the sense of her ability to win anything, she wasn't going to win anything. It was understood she wasn't going to win anything, not her own state. Taking the super PAC, splitting the vote, allowed Joe Biden to get the killing blow. I always want you to remember this. Always remember this. As lefties, you are expected to vote for them. You've done it for years. And that expectation has not served you well. My argument, and even though this is a soft touch,
Former President Joe Biden on Tuesday praised Senator Bernie.
Even though right now they're giving you the soft touch, at some point, creatures like Sam Cedar and Neera Tanden are going to be like, oh, you got to vote for this guy. You got to vote for this guy. You got to vote for Joe Biden. It's insane that you're not going to vote for Joe Biden. One concentration camp less Sam Cedar, because he said that if a person was going with one concentration camp less, he'll vote for that particular person. And you're like, God, that's where you are? By the way, this is the exact same argument, or the logic within the same argument that says, yeah, so what, Joe Biden is a rapist? I mean, so is Donald Trump. So don't you want the rapist with the better policies? This is the thinking that they're going to go by. And they're going to go out and they're going to tell their people, vote Biden. It's a simple vote. It doesn't make sense to vote otherwise. And we've been doing it for the last 40, 50 years, and it has served us greatly. Look at all of our policies. And the reality of it is, the Democratic Party in 2020 made it abundantly clear that everything that you want policy-wise, they are against, including Medicare for all, when Medicare for all is 9-point jump. Now explain to me, how do you get what you want in a party that is entirely against what you want? How? How have they cowed you so with this notion that you have nowhere else to go? Is it not time to try a different path? Is it not time to organize around this notion of principle, that this is what we want? And we are not racing to the bottom. We don't care who you put up. If that person is not representing this, you don't get this support. And 20 and 30% of people say no, and that person loses. And they continue to lose until something else happens. And the 20 and 30% starts to organize as a brainchild in and of itself that may start to create somewhat of a party. It would be great if Sanders did that, but I have no fucking clue where that's going to take place. And my greatest fear is that the left is going to fizzle out. I am bothered and plagued by all of this at once because I feel like this is such an opportunity. We're in the middle of a crisis. And the person who has the potential, best potential to do this, and get out there and make the case that I am strongly concerned that Biden is going to lose because he's not supporting Medicare for all. And I can't reconcile hundreds of thousands of people dying with this healthcare plan when Medicare for all is popular. It's number one. People are supporting it all across the United States, left, right, and independent. It's a winning message. It's the tip of the spear. We're in the middle of a pandemic. And that's what I am pushing for. And I need Joe Biden to get on board for this. And honestly, even though he has my support, I have a hard time believing my supporters are going to back him if he's not on board for this particular policy authentically. That's politics. That's politics. That's how you get things accomplished. And I will end it with my friend Lawrence O'Donnell, who's been in the machine and knows how it works.
Want to pull the party, the major party that is closest to the way you're thinking, to what you're thinking. You must show them that you're capable of not voting for them.
Because the way the Democratic Party is run now for quite a number of presidential cycles is they pick a nominee in a kind of half-assed process that doesn't really represent much of anybody. And then they tell everybody to just shut up. Don't bring up anything that will complicate life for your nominee. You know he's not for you on this. Why badger him? He's not going to be for you for reasons that you don't understand but are good reasons. Shut up. Turn off your brains.
If you don't show them you're capable of not voting for them, they don't have to listen to you. I promise you that. I worked within the Democratic Party. I didn't listen or have to listen to anything on the left while I was working in the Democratic Party because the left had nowhere to go.
The left had nowhere else to go. Consider what I'm saying. If one of those cretins, Sam Cedar or his work bitch, Michael Brooks, want to come on the show to have a conversation about why people should vote for Joe Biden, they're welcome to come on the show. Anybody who I call out is welcome to come on to the show to defend their particular position. But I am amply sure that him and his other creatures on the show are going to be like, you got to vote for Joe Biden. You got to vote for Joe Biden. And boosting Biden in the same way they boosted Clinton. That woman lost. I don't care about their boosting. Your boosting doesn't matter one iota, especially in the context of an American public that chooses to vote somebody else. What matters is whether or not the candidate they're putting up is a candidate that the American public is going to vote for, A, should be voting for, B, and if you are on the left who cares about getting actual real policy accomplished, should you just acquiesce to whatever random hack that they put up there? And how does acquiescing to any random hack gets you anything if you want in the political space? It gets you nothing. Just like it's gotten you nothing over the past 40 years. Just malign and push to the side, ignored, disrespected, and in this particular contest, just brutally attacked. Because that's effectively what the Democratic Party en masse did to the left. And now, after the beatings, after the talking down to, after the disrespect, after calling you bros and racist and sexist and abusive to women, after all of that shit, now it's going to be, hey, it's okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hit you that bad. I know you have a black eye. Here's ice. Here's a piece of ham or something. Let's get past this. You got to vote for Joe Biden now. That's what you're going to hear. En masse, in stereo, constantly. If Joe Biden doesn't fall flat on his face before the primary ends, all of these cretins are going to come out of the woodwork and say, now you got to vote for Joe Biden. Even some people who backed Sanders just to get the political clout to come back out and say, hey, I backed Sanders, now you got to vote for Joe Biden. You're going to hear it in stereo. The question becomes for the left, what do you do? What do you do? Do you allow them to talk to you that way? Do you allow them to not care about your interests to such a degree, to hit your guy, to line up en masse at your guy? Or do you sign up in unison, unify, organize en masse? It doesn't necessarily help if one or two people decide to not vote for Joe Biden. It helps when en masse the group organizes itself, where it has a large number of people and they are talking in one voice about what they will or will not be willing to accept. The fact that you have no accountability in the political process because you fold yourself in the Democratic Party, you have nowhere else to go. That leaves no political accountability. That has allowed these hacks to be in Washington right now, that when you, in the middle of a pandemic, need medical assistance, you need to make sure that the rent doesn't necessarily get you evicted. You need to ensure that your car note, that your school bills, all of these things are not necessarily tearing at you when you can't necessarily get the resources you need. You need a government that's receptive to that. And the only part of the government that would ever be receptive to that is the Democratic Party, providing the party had people in there that were held accountable by lefties and other people in the population to actually represent their interests. Unaccountability has allowed your government to be ineffective, weak, facile in regards to dealing with the crisis at hand. You've never held them accountable, so you've never had to do anything for you. So now when you have something where you need them to actually act in grand, sweeping, imaginary terms, they never had to do that. You've never required them to do that. So they're not going to do that. They don't have the faculty. This is where we are in our political space. This wobbly, out of shape, weak, unimaginative government that have made the population so deadened in their expectations and imaginations that they will get Sanders, agree with him on fucking policy, and then still choose Joe Biden. I hate to tell you, you chose wrong. Joe Biden is going to lose this race. I want Joe Biden to lose this race. That's where I'm at. I want that party burned to the fucking ground. Nothing fundamentally will get accomplished in the way that we have organized ourselves, especially in the context of lefties continue to fall in line with the Democratic Party. I understand that Trump may win, but here's the catch. The world doesn't end when Trump ends. You need to form a political body. There is no such magical door. You've allowed the country to move so far to the right because we've vacated ourselves in regards to our philosophical responsibility to stand up for the poor and the working class in this particular country out of fear and cowardice. That needs to change. If you're going to change anything, that's the door you got to walk through. You have nowhere else to go. You need to be able to walk through that particular door before anything else changes. Otherwise, cowardice will always be the hindrance to getting anything accomplished. The reality of it is, your politics and your political vision has to go beyond one election. You need to be able to create a body, a nerve center, something that organizes you under a banner where you all can speak in one voice, in a certain degree of unison, of yay or nay on this or that, and create a certain standard by which you can hold your politicians accountable by, of whether or not you're going to support those people. That's how you get your policy accomplished. Even 20% gets you that. How many people have been supporting Sanders in this race? And are you telling me that all of those people can't organize under one umbrella? And what does that look like when that happens? When all of those people say yay or nay to this or that in the political sense. And yeah, you might lose to Trump in this round, but what does it mean to have a political organization going into these elections all across the United States where all of you are speaking in one voice and in unison in election after election after election? That is political clout, that is political power, that is political leverage. And until you get that, you got nothing. That's not something that's taking place entirely in the political space. That is effectively a movement that is, yes, engaging in the political space in the same way the Tea Party was to engage in the political space. That's how you change. That's your movement. That's what gets you things accomplished. Acquiescing to democratic demands who have your interests, as much as your interest in mind, as the Republicans as much as your interest in mind, that gets you nothing. I am firmly confident and certain in that. I don't necessarily like to get to the point of certainty, because certainty, there's always something that fucks you over and you feel like you're missing something. But as close to certainty as I can be, that's where we need to be on the left. That's where I am. I am not in this camp that Joe Biden is the person to vote for at all. At all. And I agree with you, Trudy. He is being maligned. He is being cheated and everything else. But here's the catch. And be honest. Be honest. If you know, as a flat fact, that this might happen. If you know that. Now, if I am in Sanders' camp, and I'm sitting in a room with Sanders, I think I even made the video on it, I would say, look, we've won Iowa, we've won New Hampshire, we've won Nevada. We have a head of momentum going into South Carolina. And right now, we need to win, or at the very least, come close to South Carolina. We can't get blown out. The problem is, if we get blown out, primaries are won from state to state. And these primaries are going with a certain degree of momentum that when you go into one particular state and you win, you get momentum going to the next state. If we get into a situation where Joe Biden wins, he may get momentum going into the other southern states. If we can win this or keep this close, the narrative going forward is not that Sanders can't get the black vote. The narrative going forward is, wow, Sanders came extremely close in South Carolina, assisting you and trying to make your argument going forward in other states. Black people approved of him in South Carolina. Hey, maybe there's something to him after all, going into the next few states. Don't get blown out in South Carolina. That's what I would be telling Sanders. And I would have told him, before even getting into South Carolina, you got to cut into Biden. You got to cut into his black vote. Your argument is not working. Your argument is not working. We can look at the polls in South Carolina. It's not working. Yes, we've been trying to organize, but it's not working. What you are doing is not working. You got to cut into Joe Biden. That's what I would have been telling him. He would have fired me. But that's what I would have told him. I would have told him, you got to play that video. You got to show Joe Biden lying through his teeth about civil rights. You got to show the video. You have to show that. You have to show that. Sean King had access to this video, meaning Bernie Sanders had access to this video. And I would have said, look, you need to make an attack ad. You need to show the video of Joe Biden saying black folks can't take care of their kids. That needs to be a video. Immediately after, you need to show the reaction from the African American saying, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that. You have to show that. That's a video. That's a video. And it is pertinent. The younger voter who's supporting you, who's looking after you, wants you to be his mouthpiece for this hack that is lying and tokenizing the civil rights movement, a movement that you were in. You are philosophically bound to some degree to make that argument that extends beyond your friendship, that goes into something that is sacred, that is effectively being used for political ends. You have to show this video before you hit South Carolina.
You're in Delaware. For real, I got involved in the civil rights movement. We have the 8th largest black population in America. Most people don't know that. And I'd go to 8 o'clock Mass, then I'd go to Reverend Herring's church where we'd meet in order to organize and figure where we were going to go, whether we were going to desegregate the Rialto movie theater or what we were going to do. I got my education for real in the black church. And that's not hyperbole, it's a fact. But I got my education, Reverend Doc, in the black church. Not a joke. Because when we used to get organized on
the 60s, I was, in fact, very concerned about the civil rights movement. I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. I was involved in what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else. I was a suburbanite kid who got a dose of exposure to what was happening to black Americans when I'm in my own city.
You have to show that. If you don't show that, to South Carolina, it's going to look like this. It's not your fault that Joe Biden was lying about the civil rights movement. But it's your responsibility in a political space to do everything in your abilities to win. That's why people are supporting you, right? The whole objective is that is my avatar. That is the guy who's going to represent my interests. And that guy is going to do everything within his power under the law to win. You have to show that video because it's fair game to point out that Joe Biden is not being honest about being part of the civil rights movement, that he is not being honest about talking to Mandela, and that he's willing to tokenize the black community for his political ends. And you allow the black community to make a choice on whether or not they're okay with that. And some percentage of that will not be okay with that. And in not being okay with that, they may not vote, or they may vote for somebody else like you. That's politics. Joe Biden lied about something. It's upon you to show that he lied about it and let the community make a choice. When you get the opportunity to get on the debate stage and you are asked, well, for one, that Nina Turner makes the point that Joe Biden has betrayed the black community. And you're asked this, you don't make this answer.
One of your national co-chairs published an op-ed piece that said Vice President Biden has, quote, repeatedly betrayed black voters to side with Republican lawmakers and undermine our progress. Senator Sanders, do you agree with her? One of your most visible surrogates that Vice President Biden has repeatedly betrayed black voters?
Well, I think what Senator Turner was talking about are some of the early actions of Vice President Biden. But no, Joe Biden is a friend of mine, and I'm not here to attack him. But
that question had nothing to do with your friendship. And right there lies the problem. She asked you a question about whether or not Joe Biden betrayed the black community. You could have said yes on Social Security, yes on Medicare, because those services are amply needed in regards to poverty in the black community. But basically, you could have also said Joe Biden's been lying about the civil rights movement. And as a person who walked with King and who's in that movement, it angers me to some degree that Joe here would tokenize and use this as a way of trying to get political advantage with this community. I don't like it, and it bothers me. You could have said that. Then you're saying that with a certain moral authority because you were there. You were dragged away. Yes, that is cutthroat politics. But tell me I'm wrong in regards to the potential impact of that particular statement, the reverberation that would have made, and the clips that would have been all out going viral because he said that to Joe Biden. And think about the question that would have been posed to African Americans across the board with, has Joe Biden been tokenizing the black community? You immediately come out with an ad showing Joe Biden lying about that in order to make your point that much more clear. And it hits South Carolina, it hits Georgia, it hits all those southern states. And you continuously make the point that he has been lying about civil rights. You can still make your aspirational argument. Nobody's stopping you from doing that. But that must be, God damn it, it's crucial. It is political malpractice that was not done. I would have been screaming at the height of my lungs. Every time I saw Sanders, I would have been yelling at him. You got to do this. You got to do this. They would have fired me. I would have been utterly belligerent because it's political malpractice not to do that. It's an obvious play. Obama would have did it in a heartbeat. Wouldn't have thought twice about it. Wouldn't have thought twice. Sanders couldn't be bothered. Don't tell me, God damn it, don't tell me that everybody cheated him, that everybody rigged it. Don't tell me that. I'm sorry. He had chances. He had opportunities. And he did not take those opportunities. He didn't want to. His friendship mattered more. And again, yes, simmering rage over that. It's, God damn it, it's a simmering rage. Getting rid of student debt, God damn it. Medical bills, Medicare for all. And we get Joe fucking Biden as the candidate for the Democratic Party who can't even give a coherent speech. That is so fucking embarrassing. And the notion that you gave over your support immediately to get nothing in return for this. fucks me that much more. I don't know what he thinks we're in. And I know Bernie Sanders knows more about politics than I do, so fair enough. But god damn it, I don't understand. Like, I know enough about politics to know that these people have all sorts of incentives and things that are tearing at them and pulling at them. They're not going to give you anything. Their perspective is not what's in the best interest of the American public. Their perspective is what is in their best interest. There may be a modicum of ideology associated with the way they operate, but that modicum of ideology, all things being equal, flow in the direction of best interests in pursuit of the game space. And their game space is politics. They need cash to get elected. 90% of the elections are won by the side with the most cash. So that's how they function. It's logical as logical can be, considering the game space that they operate in. The public itself matters little to nothing, because the public itself is not mobilized and trying to use the political space to its own ends. And so they flow to the sides of cash. You have dollars, you have pitchforks. In this case, you've only had dollars. You have a public that is running full, well, unabated on a hamster wheel. What, 70 to 80% of the population is running paycheck to paycheck? Your society, like, for fuck's sake, 90% of the income, 95% of the income gains went to the top 1% under Obama. Why is that okay? Pull yourself out of the system for the moment and stop looking at yourself as an individual actor in some individual job making some kind of wage, where you think that your plight is entirely an issue of you and not necessarily an issue of society. That is one of those propagandistic terms of pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. That only really helps somebody who's in the 1% class. You effectively are your neighbor, who's effectively his neighbor, who's effectively his neighbor. All of us are individuals under the same umbrella of this issue of class. Why? Stand outside. Stand on the moon. You have the majority of the population, it's what, 60% living off like $10 a day, if you're talking about the world. And in the richest country on the planet, you're not able to supply ventilators for the various people in your country. What is wrong with your country where that takes place? If nothing else, a crisis brings to some degree the failings in your ideology, in your thinking, and yes, in the way that you've organized yourself to have a situation like this. It didn't have to be this way, and if it didn't have to be this way, why is it this way? Why is that $4.5 or $6 trillion if you're adding in the Fed? Why is $6.5 trillion being dumped into corporate giveaway? And this pittance of $1,200, which is not even going to get here in order to deal with the rent payment for this month, given to the American public almost as money thrown to a bum for them to shut up while they go away in the heist. Why is that okay? Stop looking at yourself as an individual actor. Look at this as a system to which you are operating in. And in looking at this as a system, ask yourself, is it okay that 95% of the income gains go to the top 1%? Why don't we have Medicare for all? There's no right and wrong in this. This is choice. Your government conforms to the things that you need it to do. Why don't we have Medicare for all? Why is that not a viable option in regards to dealing with the healthcare crisis and the medical debt and everything else? It's a cheaper program. The other countries are having it. Everybody is covered. They have better healthcare outcomes. Why not? Those things have issues of accountability associated with it. And yes, we've had no accountability. I'm saying just looking at what your government is, what your government can do, what your society is, what your society aims for, just in different terms. None of it matters. None of it's real. Ultimately, you come together and make a decision on what you want it to be and what you want it to do. People get their heads wrapped up in capitalism, socialism, communism. None of that stuff is real in real terms. Those are just thought models. What do you want your government to do? Start there. There's no right or wrong. Right and wrong in this case all depends upon what you as an individual believe it is and what the rest of you believe it is. My argument is that we should make government work towards expansionism in regards to humanity, as opposed to capital. That is a sea change in thinking. I don't even know how you get there, right? My thought is if people thought of themselves in other people, meaning I am him and he is him and he is him, we find ourselves here almost as a quirk. I end up in this particular country, someone else ends up in another particular country. Why not work together to ensure we get the best as opposed to competing? We don't think in those terms. It's, I got to get mine, fuck anybody else. That's this kind of capitalistic impulse of everybody for themselves. I'm thinking about the world in somewhat different terms, though, and I'm asking, why not? Yes, I know it's fanciful. Yes, I know it's difficult to see how to get from point A to point B. Yes, I know it's difficult to get people to see themselves in others. So fair enough. But even in the standpoint of what government is and what it can do right now, it has every capability in the world to ensure that each and every person has health care. It has every capability in the world to ensure each and every person can go to school. It has every capability in the world to ensure that people can stay home while getting their paychecks over the course of the pandemic. It's an issue of political will and what your country wants to focus its priorities on. And right now, the priorities has been effectively a corporate giveaway while the rest of the public struggles. There's one guy in this race that represents something else, and that guy has given over his support already. Cool Blue 71. I stopped voting Democrat after 2014, rejected Democrats in 2016, 2018, likely again in 2020. Joe Rogan is correct. Trump is better than Biden. Democrats are a sham. This argument of lesser evil, I am sick of it. I'm done with that. I'm done. Sanders is a Pied Piper. He's done, son. Love your show. Finding Neo. Thank you, Finding Neo. I appreciate it. I don't think he's a Pied Piper. I understand what you're saying, but I don't think he's intentionally a Pied Piper. I think... I gotta be honest, I don't know. I mean, I just don't... My brain doesn't work that way, that's all. Like, my focal point of the world is just different than his. I have, like I said, I've grown up playing chess. And in chess, you win by hook or by crook in regards to everything that was in the rule set. And your opponent understands that you're trying to debone him, and he's trying to debone you. There's no quarter given. You have an ultimate objective, and everything else is subordinate to that objective. That's the game. I consider politics to be the exact same way. So when Sanders doesn't run in that way, it's peculiar to me, in which case I make a video saying, what the fuck is Sanders doing? And you find out, and I got to be honest, the reason that I think Sanders lost is for the exact reason that I'm pointing out in regards to the black vote. That was the point where he hit his head. He had every other racial demographic. And you should ask yourself, why not? Now, if the aspirational argument isn't working, what other item do you have in your toolkit? Oh, right, I have a hammer. And you clock him over the head. You're not lying. Joe Biden is lying about his support in regards to what he's been doing in the black community. Why is it not your obligation as a political person to point that out and let that community make a decision on whether or not they're okay with Joe Biden lying about them in this way? That's not bad. That's not a negative ad. It's an ad correcting the record. Yes, it hits hard. Yes, it's a knife. But yes, it is also absolutely correct and fair game. And when you're standing in the debate and she asks you, you say yes. He's been lying about the civil rights movement, and I'm angry about the fact he's been lying about the civil rights movement, and you get a little bit angry. That's politics. That's what you do. That's how you win. You can't get everything that you want in regards to the way life is. There are plenty of things that I would want to do. I would love to go on vacation for weeks without requiring dialysis. That would be fucking awesome. I would love to do that. I would die. I've pushed it, I think, for maybe a week, and afterwards, it goes too far. I think it's gone 8 or 9 days when I was traveling. I would love to go longer. Can't do it. There are limits. Limits are just those things that you have to deal with. And in the sense of politics, it is something to be said for walking between lines in regards to how you want to behave versus what the environment demands based on the objective that you've chosen. And I'm sorry, I love Picard, but Jean-Luc Picard is wrong. His argument that, hey, there's always another way. No, that's not true. I'm sorry, that's not true. There are some situations, just based on probability alone, there will always be some situations where there is no other way. You're on an airplane, the airplane is falling, there is no way out of that. You're dying. You can be the cutest baby, you can be the sexiest woman, you can have the largest penis in the world. It doesn't matter one iota. You are dying. There is nothing you can do in that situation that is going to save your life. There are some no way out situations. I'm making the point that there are limitations in regards to aspirational arguments. And you must be aware of those limitations when those aspirational arguments are not doing what you need them to do. Meaning you need to be willing to look at what else do I have at my disposal to get where I need to get to and accomplish my particular objective. And if what's in your toolkit is he's lying about civil rights, then you play that card. Now, I could be wrong, so don't misunderstand me. I could be entirely wrong that works. Maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it doesn't pull the percentage necessary in order to get it. Maybe it doesn't get the airplay that he needs. Maybe it doesn't get the reverberation that it needs after the debate. Fair enough. But my argument here is he didn't do that, and you see what happened. What happens with a more aggressive approach in dealing with Joe Biden, especially on the issue of race? Meaning Sanders is making a contest on the black vote explicitly and attacking on that particular issue of, I was part of the civil rights movement, you weren't, you're lying. And yes, like I said, that's a brutal attack piece, but that is fighting Joe Biden on an issue where he needs to get that support. This was the beginning of the end for Sanders. What if that didn't happen? What if that didn't happen? Elizabeth Warren holding Sanders down on Super Tuesday, using a super PAC to do so. Using a super PAC, allowing 3 or 4 more states that Sanders would have gotten if Warren wasn't in the race to go to Biden. I'm unclear how you deal with that one. I'm more clear on how you deal with South Carolina. Fact of the matter is, Warren held Sanders down and split the vote in those various states. And the thing is, I'm not entirely clear on how you actually deal with Warren to deal with that particular situation outside of winning, or at the very least damaging Joe Biden in South Carolina. My thought is, it's here where you make the biggest shift. If you can carve into those numbers in South Carolina, it looks different when you go into the other states, including Super Tuesday. Keep in mind, Sanders was considered a juggernaut in this. Now, I don't know if you can go back channel with Warren and try to get some level of support with her. I don't know. Maybe he needs to be more vocal in getting that particular support, trying to get her to get out the race. But the catch here is, I'm inclined to believe that Warren is not a factor of ideology. She's a political actor. And in her mind, the Joe Biden camp is probably going to be the camp to win, just like the Hillary Clinton camp was the camp to win, and she's going to get political concessions, at the very least she believes she is, for backing Biden. I don't believe that she would have ever taken Sanders from the vice presidential pick at all, or worked with him in that sense. I just don't buy it. I think she works with the Democratic Party. She's a creature of the party. She's shown that in 2016. She's shown it in 2020. That's my thought. So I don't know how you stop her from taking that super PAC to split that vote. And I don't know if overtures to her to get out the race and back you when the moderates got out of the race and kind of consolidated works. So that's a problem. So fair enough in my logic. But from the standpoint of trying to break Joe Biden in South Carolina, and breaking him in South Carolina would have pulled Joe Biden out of the race, people would have questioned, why is Joe Biden in the race if he can't win South Carolina like that? He's lost it. That's your goalposts. But that's not what happened. He didn't go there. He wasn't willing to go there. He ran a typical race, and he got crushed in South Carolina. Joe Biden comes back. Oh my God, Joe Biden is now inevitable again. You get into Super Tuesday. Elizabeth Warren stays in the race, attacking Sanders relentlessly. Cuts into Sanders' numbers in various states. Massachusetts, I think it was Maine. It was like 4 states that Sanders would have won if Warren wasn't in the race, or at the very least he would have been in contestant for. Then Warren gets out the race after Super Tuesday, because at that point, the damage is done. We've stopped Sanders. Congratulations. Pat on the back. She gets out the race. Gets on Rachel Maddow and attacks Sanders. Gives Joe Biden a loving nod, despite the fact that Joe Biden supposedly is not the guy who represents the interests. That guy was supposed to be Sanders. That's why I keep saying Warren was not a bug. She's a feature in what took place in this race. Can't stand her. Fucking can't stand her. Honest to God. How much is on Faz Shakir? So Faz Shakir basically, supposedly, was one of the people who was telling Sanders to get out the race. Jeff Weaver giving political nonsense advice, saying he's going to have more clout if he's buddies with Joe Biden. They're going to give him nothing. And you're telling him to get out the race because he's going to get something out of the deal. He's not going to get anything at all the moment he get out the race. Mark my words, and mark them well, boy. To take a, I forget where that comes from. Sorry. I in my head, I have comic books and all sorts of movies and whatnot. These thematic themes. My wife said I think in dramatic terms. But mark my words. Mark my words. This will not happen. Pissing in the wind. Nobody's going to give this section of the video to Sanders where he's going to be like, holy shit, that guy's right. But I've been right this entire election. Go back and look at my videos. When I'm wrong, I say so, but I have been right far more than I've been wrong. More right than Uyghur, more right than Vigeland, Grimm, all of those people. I have been right. Yes, this is my Venus and Leo showing. This is how, a certain degree of pomp. Fair enough. I accept that. There's a certain degree of smugness in saying that. But when I'm wrong, I say I'm wrong. And I accept the fact that I'm wrong. It's not personal in this case. In fact, it doesn't serve my ego at all if I'm wrong. So, if you're just faking it, there's no point. I remember there was a guy, we were playing chess, and the guy was trying to pump his chess rating. And I looked, it's like, this guy's a fucking 1,500 player. Now, at the time, I'm like 1,900, almost 2,000. But I never needed to pump my rating up. It is what it is what it is. If I lose a game, I don't necessarily want to say I won the game. There's no point in cheating in the game in that sense, because that doesn't do anything for my ego. It's kind of the way I look at this stuff, including politics and this kind of analysis. The only way you're ever going to get anything accomplished politically, from the standpoint of Sanders, if he stays in the race, would be to change his demeanor and to just add a basic technical point that he continues to say. Whether he calls for general strikes and everything else, or rent off all of those things, he needs a megaphone for that, so fair enough. But if he makes the basic argument that, look, I think Joe Biden is going to lose. The 24% support is abysmal, and I can't stand by and allow Trump to get 4 more years. If Joe Biden really wants my supporters to back him, he needs to do something radical like support Medicare for all. I still, endorse Joe Biden, but my supporters don't always listen to me, and I can't necessarily blame them for not. Joe Biden and the Democratic Party need to support Medicare for all, and my supporters are probably not going to back him. They're going to piss and moan and bitch and everything else, and Sanders needs to stay with that point. They hated you anyway. They were going to hate you regardless. They were going to blame you regardless. So what the fuck does it matter what they say to you when they were going to say it anyway? I hope you understand my point. You're radically free. You're radically free only because nothing that you do will ever appease them. So you do what you want. That's kind of the weakness of having all of those people being just diametrically opposed to you. In this particular case, it is not necessarily saying you're breaking any of your ethical rules. You're still endorsing Biden. You're just adding a caveat. That caveat being the obvious that 24% support is going to lose that race for Joe Biden, and you, caring about America and caring about the world, don't want to see that loss. And you make the choice that, look, if you support Medicare for all, I think my supporters might back you. You put a condition on your supporters' support. You still endorse Joe Biden because that's what you said you were going to do. But the condition that you put on it makes it very clear to your supporters that you want them to have an ideological edge and bend in the way that they go out and vote. That is something that you can do. That is something that is well within your power if you don't want to go further in the political space. The fact that Joe Biden and the way he's running this race, he is going to lose. Make that argument. You've made that argument once before. Make that argument again. But add the caveat to allow your supporters to understand that Medicare for all is the litmus test. He's not going to do that. Should he do that? Yes. If he cared about Joe Biden getting elected, should he do it? Yes. Because if you're looking for a way to get Joe Biden elected, he's going to have to give something to get elected. You have a huge number of people who are not going to vote Joe Biden. Will the Democratic Party acquiesce? Probably not. Will that make it that much better when they lose? Yes. Because at that point, the left would have stood with a backbone and made it clear that they're not necessarily going to vote for any random hack. Going forward, that left, at that point, would need to be able to have policy ideas, agendas, things that it needs, and even with the potential to develop into something larger than itself as a party. But it all starts with the left organizing and working in tandem as one united front. I don't know how that works. I don't even know how that is made. I've seen nothing of the sort. This notion of organizing Walmart workers, Target workers, McDonald's, Burger King, all of these service jobs, and having these guys under one political umbrella of the left, their natural home of sorts. I'm talking about a political body working under the existing political system, all organized. I have no idea how that works. I would love for that to be our case. All right, one more. I can't believe we've gone for nearly 2 hours. All right, this will be the last one. Where is it? Come on. What am I missing? Come on. Dude, where is your super chat? I can't see the chat from where I am. Hold on. It's not showing me the whole thing. Alright, let's try this. I have another idea. Guys, I'm glad you guys hung out. It's almost like I kind of want to say bear with me as I work through my issues. That's honestly pretty much what it is. Me working through my issues. I saw that one. All right, right here. Bernie can't give up the old modicum of honor amongst men. He needs to be reminded that he is running on not me, us. Damn it, represent us. Damn it, represent us. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you say, what does it mean to represent us? And does that mean to acquiesce and try to get Joe Biden elected when he offers nothing? Or does that mean using your political clout to organize a brain center of lefties that will supersede you, Sanders, allowing it to be us, allowing debate, argument, decisions on policy, all of that stuff for all of these lefties all across the United States. The money that we were putting into Sanders, that money could be put into an organization instead of Sanders, where all of us work in tandem. I don't know what that is. I don't know how to create that. I'm just making the point that in this particular moment where Sanders is currently still in the race and he has all of these email lists, all of these names, all of these people that have been united and webbed together, if he goes away, that goes away and poof, it would be a massive, massive disservice to lose all of that. I'm saying as long as you're in the race, create a brain center. Create a neural network, webbing all of these people across the United States together. And allow a situation where these people can talk, communicate, argue about policy, maybe even create political structures where they can vote on X or vote on Y, where you have millions of people who are a coalition who are making certain decisions of litmus tests and things that they are willing to support and not support. That's what I'm talking about. And you have the opportunity to do that. Even if you don't do that, you have the opportunity to use your leverage to try to force policy with concessions on the Democratic Party. Meaning there is room for Sanders to maneuver here. He's not necessarily counted out. He's only counted out depending upon how he behaves in this moment. If he continues to behave the way he has, yes, he will be maligned and he will be pushed to the side. You have to act differently than you've been acting up to this point. You guys are going to have to bear with me as we go through this because, like I said, I have a certain degree of part of me feels it's not fair because he's in that position, not me. And I don't know what the fuck to do. I feel like a lot of people, in order to make that change take place and to get that spark and to get that grouping and to get that organization, I have no idea how to do that. And so it's like this kind of feeling of disaffected or disjointedness or inability to dedicate yourself to something to make X or Y because you don't even know how to do X or Y. It's just a really bizarre feeling. But it's also this feeling that there's a potential there to get something accomplished even now that is not being had. And then there's this other feeling of God, we missed an opportunity. 50 years, 60 years, we've missed an opportunity. Like, in my head, and maybe I was naive about this, I thought it's been 60 years or more since a candidate like FDR has come up to the podium. Certainly, with that many years behind us, you're at this precipice. You go all in. It's like meeting a woman at a diner and she's drop dead gorgeous and she gives you the one shot. Go all in. It's not going to happen again. Pulling out all the stops. You're buying the Viagra. It's like, all right, I'm going to be a Superman tonight. Oh my God, I'm going to be all powerful. And you go all in. I have no idea if this is ever going to happen again. So yeah, fuck it. Do it all. Now, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. I'm just making the point that it's the not knowing when the opportunity will happen again that you would think compels the behavior. I hope you understand what I mean. Yes, I'm being base in making that example. But it does have a point, right? You don't know when you're going to get the opportunity again, given the time frame that has passed between the last guy who was that way. And so just because the moment, it's energized, it's frenetic, and you think this is the moment, fate is on our side, the cosmic wind itself, if there's a God above, he is rooting for Bernie. The light at the end of the tunnel is not a train coming ahead. He's going to win this thing. And then the candidate comes out, everybody else has their weapon and their knife, and he's like, got my ink pen. I'm going to write speech after speech after speech. And they're like, motherfucker. God damn it. It's aggravating to watch that. Oh, it's aggravating. God damn it, it's fucking aggravating. It's so fucking aggravating. It just hurts to watch that. I'll leave it here. Serenity now. Serenity now. Serenity now. Serenity now. Serenity now. Like, I know this has been a wandering soapbox. I think some of it is good. Some of it is probably wandering. Yes, I have a certain degree of ire on my chest, and like I said, my feelings are complicated. I accept what Bernie Sanders has done. I take nothing from him. But I also accept that this was a missed opportunity. And look, if somebody wants to argue with me that it wasn't, call into the radio show at Come At Me Bro, send super chat or whatever. We can do that. I'm up for that. If one of those hacks, Cedar or Brooks, wants to come on and bitch at me for not backing Biden, they're welcome to do so, either on the radio show or this channel. But thank you for allowing me to work through my issues of anger on this. I think I'm I don't think I'm unlike of other Sanders supporters. There's a height that goes along with it. And there's a high that goes along with this notion of, yes, we're going to get big things done. We're going to do our moonshot. We're going to do a moon landing. We're going to be the generation that's going to get Medicare for all done. We're going to do something. We're going to finally do big things. We can do this. And then like a letdown in that. And it's like, it's not a letdown because, wow, they just fucking beat us in a brawl. Like, all right, fair enough. They kicked our ass. Well, you know, it is what it is. I accept that. They bit my bloody my. Fair enough. I couldn't win. I got to get better. It wasn't that. It was, they just punched me in the face over and over again. And I tried to reason with them and argue with them, but they just hit me in the face. And after a while, the guy, Elizabeth Warren, stands behind me, and the guy punched me and I just fall back. And you're looking at your guy, and you're like, what the fuck just happened? Why is he doing that? What the fuck is going on? And you're looking around like, I put $250 million on that guy. What is that guy doing? And you're like, God damn it. You didn't even throw a punch. Why didn't you throw a punch? What are you doing? What are you doing? Like, it's that. It feels like a letdown. It feels like you've had these high aspirations and hopes, And maybe they were overly inflated in regards to reality. But to me, it's not overinflated. Especially when it's tethered to a model that you're willing to do whatever with a ruthless, radical devotion to a cause because of what is at stake in regarding not having that cause met. This level of urgency associated with it. That's my expectation. And so when the candidate doesn't have that expectation like that, I'm confused. I'm confused. It's a letdown, that's all. Letdowns hurt. Somebody's going to have this video and they're going to be like, a Republican, oh, Jamarl is let down, he's sad. I'm man enough to admit that. My sadness comes across as anger and indignation, so fair enough. That's just how I process that stuff. But I don't think I'm wrong. I don't think I'm wrong. If you think I'm wrong, let me know. I don't think I'm wrong on this. I mean, everything at the end of the day approaches, whether you believe it or not, to a certainty versus you don't believe it at all, with most of the time and not being 0 or 1. In this case, yeah, I don't think I'm wrong. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks all.